Welcome to Qualified Opinions, where we test the ideas and limits, the knowns and known unknowns around freedom and order in contemporary politics and society. We invite you to listen as we engage with leading and emerging thinkers across disciplines and issues who will sharpen our thinking on the topics shaping our discourse.
Welcome back. Today, I'm really excited to welcome my friend, Jessica Melugin. Jessica is the director of the Center for Technology and Innovation at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And the reason why I wanted to have Jessica on, apart from the fact that this is actually the only way we can actually talk to each other, because though we love each other, we never see each other, is because she wrote this fabulous article for Civitas called Lina Khan's Continued Influence on the FTC. And basically, for those who haven't read it, I guess it will go something like this. The Biden FTCs expanded a pre-major filing rule. We'll talk about that. That is dramatically increasing compliance burden on all merger. And this rule was so legally and economically dubious that the Texas federal courts struck it down, right? But by some turn of circumstances, the Trump FTC is actually seemed to be very sympathetic to this bad rule. So that's what we're going to talk about, like this thing that's happening, right? So can you, first, welcome. I'm really happy to see you.
Get ready for just two good friends, two gal pals talking about regulation, everyone.
That sounds great.
Pull up a drink.
So what is the FTC actually? And what is it doing?
That's a great question that apparently we're still asking something about in the courts even today. The Federal Trade Commission, What is it? And we can get into that later if you want to, about who is it accountable to and how does all this work. But in this case, the piece I wrote about was the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act, which is just a bunch of filings, the statute's from 1976, and it's a bunch of filings that companies worth a certain amount, once they're merged, have to file with the Federal Trade Commission so that that agency can take a look and say, do we have any competition concerns here? Are consumers going to be harmed in this? So it used to be, and for nearly 50 years it was, that the monetary threshold adjusted, but what kind of paperwork you had to turn in remained largely the same. And all of that changed under Lina Khan's FTC, which was President Biden's FTC. They decided they weren't getting enough information, and to use a little shorthand, they turned what was the second filing, which was only requested in circumstances where the commission thought there was a problem, which was about 3% of the total cases. They turned that second filing into the first filing. So that's how compliance costs were raised. So as it recently stood, if you had a merged company that was going to be worth kind of around $134 million after all was said and done, you had to file a lot more paperwork than in the 50 years preceding. So the U.S. Chamber filed to sue before the rules went into effect, which was actually under the Trump FTC. And the courts agreed and said, the cost benefit just isn't here. This was only 3% that needed this second round of filings, and now you're making everyone do it. And furthermore, that's not really what Congress said in this act. The act itself, Hart-Scott-Rodino, the HSR, said you had to file paperwork that the agency needs to see if there's a problem. Well, this is asking for a lot more than just that. So the rule was struck down. And I think the strange thing that I wanted to talk about in the piece was, why is this Trump Republican-controlled FTC still fighting this in the court? The court stopped it from going into effect. So now in practice, we're back to the old set. But the point is, when Republicans came in, why didn't they just drop this rule? They could have delayed it. They could have undone it. They've started a proceeding to start over again now. But it's just sort of a strange layover from the Biden administration that you wouldn't normally, in normal political times, which we are not obviously living in, you wouldn't expect a Republican FTC to want to hold on to these rules that were, pretty, frankly, to use a scientific term, lefty. So I just thought it was an interesting example of the horseshoe theory at work, which for you and our work means a horseshoe being thrown at our heads, I think is the equivalent. Being struck by an actual horseshoe.
And it's kind of like, I mean, we can ask the same question about why is it that proposal to actually get 10% shares in Intel that were proposed, I think, by Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, actually President Trump has done? Or why is it that the Warren capping credit card interest rates is now like, a proposal that the Trump administration, but that Senator Hawley and JD Vance when he was senators have supported. It's this kind of type of horseshoe. I mean, yeah.
Horseshoe.
Same thing.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Everyone knows what you mean. You know what? I had a sneaking suspicion you might have you of all people might have some words.
Yeah. It is like it's everywhere. It's kind of like just totally crazy. But I mean, like just take the basic like protectionism was a thing of the left, right? I mean, and the labor left, actually, the really kind of hardcore left. And now it's like apparently it's hard to find a Republican who doesn't have something positive to say about tariffs. But before we actually go and answer part of this question of why is this in this particular case, or like you highlighting kind of all the steps that you find interesting about this, let's kind of take a step back and kind of talk a little bit about Lina Khan. I mean, Lina Khan, where does this come from? Because it's driven by more than the desire for more information and the desire for more paperwork. Some people love paperwork, right? Some people become CPA. We love CPA, especially, so close to tax day. I'll never want to, do my taxes, like no offense. But some people love paperwork. But in her case, there's a theory behind it all, right?
Yeah, and she was quoted around town here and there, indicating that, if these increased compliance costs meant that more mergers were abandoned or not even tried or didn't get through, she certainly wasn't losing any sleep over that, right? Because part of that group, the neo-Brandeisians philosophy, is that we have like a huge concentration problem of industry in this country. That economic data doesn't necessarily bear that out, but I think that you can say she and her group were just much more generally skeptical of mergers overall across the board. So I think that for her, if a few of them were lost in the paperwork shuffle, great. That's kind of what they couldn't get done in Congress by changing some of the, specifically like the tech antitrust laws and making merging more difficult. She was happy to accomplish through some drowning in paperwork. And I think that's not exactly the same motivation that we see from this FTC. This one's a little more confusing, the current FTC. And to their credit, merger activity has improved. Khan's FTC would not settle, would not work with companies, wouldn't say, okay, we don't like how you have it structured here, but maybe if you spin off this or you agree to do that or whatever, we can work with you to get it through. I think this administration is much more willing to do that. And during the Khan years, they really wanted to either kill things or take things to court because they were looking to establish case law. They were looking to change what the courts default to. And the only way to do that is to bring cases and hope you win, which she was not particularly successful at. But that was the thinking at the time.
But I'll say, I know you've told me you've read Adam White's piece in Commentary that was like 2 years ago or something like this, or a year and a half ago.
It's great.
But one of the things that he talks about in there is like, we shouldn't rejoice so much about the loss in courts. Of course, these are great. But the thing that she was also trying to do is create uncertainty, which is like
further deterrent to even trying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like,
I think she was working on many levels,
yes,
right?
And
if the case law changed, great. If it just stopped people from trying because it was too expensive or they might lose in court, great. So yeah, I completely agree. She was deterring the effort.
So was she driven by anything that is big is bad?
Yeah, I think for sure that's some of it. And I think, it's not fair for me to say what's in the mind of neo-Brandisians. They certainly can and do speak for themselves. But I think, if you look
Not very
at what
clearly.
Lina Khan is fair. I mean, no comment. But, if you look where Lina Khan is employed now, she's helping with the transition team of the new mayor in New York City.
Mhm.
So I think we can.
And she started that center at Columbia about like
Yes.
literally.
I think there's some skepticism to the wisdom of free markets. I think it's fair to say that she, and that's some of that is just lefty normie stuff. But I think that to the extreme that they take it is something that was different under Biden, right? I mean, it just doesn't feel like, just as there aren't a lot of moderate Republicans, in fairness, left, the moderate Democrat, we seem to have just kind of pushed out to the edge. And I think that Lina Khan was a good example of that early on the left.
Yeah, and traditionally, the antitrust kind of like the way of judging whether there was a case for antitrust or not was like the consumer welfare rule. That is something too that they're
not a big fan of.
They're neo-Brandisian.
For 40 years, we kind of agreed in this country. I mean, so for a long time, antitrust policy in the U.S. was a big mess, and people really, the Sherman Act that had kicked it all off, the OG of antitrust, as I call it, pretty vague, pretty short, pretty open-ended. And we spent decades fighting about what was it for? Were we protecting little companies against big companies? Were we protecting consumers? What were we doing with this? There's a famous quote from a Supreme Court justice that said he didn't even know. And all he could figure was that antitrust law just means that the government's always right. So we kind of cleaned that up in this country in academics in the 1970s, maybe a little earlier. And that was really kind of common practice by the time the 80s rolled in and Ronald Reagan was around. Our courts had certainly adopted that, and even the agencies. So the FTC had like 40 years of fairly bipartisan agreement, as the leadership shifted there with the presidency, that we might disagree on this or that case or this or that issue in degree. We all agree that the welfare of the consumer is the guiding light here. And if we don't see increased prices, or we don't see a lack of innovation or a lack of output, if consumers are doing okay, we're going to kind of agree that everything's okay and we probably don't need to intervene. But
great source of employment for economists working with lawyers on this one, right?
There you go. That's our economist commentary right there. So I think that the big first break in that was the Biden FTC and Lina Khan and all the neo-Brandisians that were in that administration. And they certainly had come from academia. That was they had academic backgrounds, and this was like an academic resurgence of this Brandisian stuff that had been milling around a bit. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh. And it takes human form with Wu in the White House and Khan at the FTC. And I think it surprised a lot of people because it's a pretty, and I say this as an extreme free market person. So, I mean, no shade for an extreme opinion here, but that was a pretty extreme take on all of this. And to have it so infused in the Biden administration, I think was surprising for people. And I think when the administration shifted back to Trump, people kind of didn't know what that meant. What is this like America first antitrust? What is that? I still probably can't really tell you, because I think some of the power that neo-Brandisian group put in place is something that appeals to some members of the Trump administration too. I think they want to do different things with that power to different ends, but I think that concentration of power, it's not like a hands-off Ronald Reagan revolution over there by any means, but it kind of has a different flavor.
Yeah. When the Texas Judge Cornudo or Noto, or
I hope that's his name. Let's say that's his name. It's great.
So when he's
I love it. I will not correct you. We're going with that. Fact check me, people. I'm not afraid. It's wrong. Don't care.
When he struck down the rule, he did it partially on cost benefit grounds and partially on the post Loeb right grounds, right?
Right.
So can you tell us what Loeb right is?
Yeah. So for a long time, many, many years, the court's position was sort of like, well, Congress generally delegated these agencies to run this and that and enforce this and that. And the court said, well, if there's some question about if they've gone too far, we're gonna defer to the agencies because they're experts, which, I mean, buy that or don't, I'll leave that to you all as informed citizens. There certainly are experts, and then there certainly are people who maybe you wouldn't want to be unelected in making these decisions. So in the Loper case, like they said, actually, we're gonna double back on that. And we're gonna say that unless Congress explicitly delegated this power to you to do that, there can be a threshold of economic impact that just is too big to leave up to kind of like a unelected or indirectly appointed sea of bureaucrats here. So it's kind of shifted to, very generally speaking, it's just shifted the default position to one where courts went, well, we're going to defer to the agencies, to one where they say, we're going to need to see that statute that Congress passed and read that pretty carefully. So that's part of what this judge in Texas said.
Yeah. And so Lover-Bright effectively overturned Chevron, which was like a wild dream of the free market movement for the longest time,
we just lost our minds.
Yes.
Just dancing in the streets.
Well, but didn't that
unbelievable
kind of, we did just that.
This is the stuff that thrills us, just so everyone knows
exactly
who they're dealing with.
But isn't it kind of, doesn't this, I've always kind of wondered, like thinking about this as a total outsider. I was always thinking, isn't that kind of like, if the statute is so vague and the Supreme Court says like the statute is so vague, so now we're not going to defer to the agency, but we're going to ask Congress to kind of go back and actually say, what do you mean here, right? Because isn't that what it's supposed to do? Good luck, because Congress doesn't want to do jack and
anything.
So kind of like, so with this Texas case, so they invoke.
So I think what the theoretical idea is,
in theory,
that in theory, and it used to be
more
often
theory,
the case.
By the way.
I think
we
love theory. Yeah, we're big on theory here, and I'm talking to the right person. So in theory, like if the court made a decision that said, "Oh, Congress didn't say you could do that," it's not that the court has thwarted Congress, right?
No,
it's theoretically possible, and it used to happen more often that Congress could the next day say, you know what? That's right. We haven't said that, and now we're going to vote on it, and now we're going to say it. This is not the situation in which we find ourselves today. So I think that in practical terms, that decision just constrains the agencies, the executive agencies or independent agencies in this case. So, I think that there is a way that it's set up to work and be just a ping pong back to Congress and say, you want to, balls in your court, clarify what you meant here. But of course, they don't want to do that. They're busy. I don't know what they're doing. But they're not legislating.
Well, they're not passing any budgets. I can tell you that.
No.
Right. No. In fact, it's kind of like interesting. Like they have become so ineffective. I mean, writing budgets is their number one job in theory, right? Like the
Have you told them that? You should tell them. I don't think they know.
I do. But they're they're too busy doing nothing to actually even listen. But it's kind of actually quite fascinating now where it's been a long time since they've actually really passed a budget that is actually following the regular order. In fact, in the last 50 years that we've had this budget process since 74, so actually even like now maybe 52 years, they've only passed the budget through the regular order 4 times, but now it's actually even worse than it was before. At the very least, they put these appropriations bills together, and now they pass CRs and they pass omnibus bill, like these enormous kind of bill. They don't follow the process. They're never in time. They pass CRs. And now they're actually literally moving above the appropriator's head by doing just budget stuff through reconciliation, which is this thing that was supposed to be kind of like this very narrow thing that allows them to make big changes without having 60 votes in the Senate, but only a simple majority. It's totally crazy. It's not just they're doing nothing, but when they're actually doing something, they're doing it in a way that is making the whole Congress and its budgetary process totally kind of irrelevant. It's wild. It's
a group of individuals very committed to not legislating and not voting.
yes,
They really
yeah,
are laser focused
yeah.
on minimizing the number of actual things to go on the record for. So I think,
Unless it's
I
theater, right?
I think they like to have hearings on things and then get to go on cable news for things and get to, like, I don't know, talk about stuff,
Yeah.
be on TV and stuff. But when it comes to actually, like, working to get legislation passed, I don't think it's the most popular activity
Yeah.
at the moment, is my impression.
Yeah.
That's just, as a downtown DC observer,
Yes.
that's what I take away. And I think with this Loper Bright decision limiting what the agencies can do too, I think the idea was just a general constraint, and maybe one day Congress will be more functional and
Sorry.
they'll be able to come back and
Did I
say,
laugh at that?
no, I mean,
Sometimes
it's nice to dream.
yes.
I don't know.
I know.
I don't know how to fix it. I'll leave that to the constitutional scholar people, but I'm sure they have some ideas about how to fix Congress. But
Let's talk about the shoe horse. Horseshoe.
the horseshoe.
Yeah.
But you know what? Can we call it shoe horse for the purposes of this?
Yeah.
I like that we're making our own
Like language for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
the nomenclature of
so-
just this single podcast.
Let's
I'm totally invested in
let's
it.
talk about this, because in your piece you actually kind of have a biography, like, of sorts, kind of showing the lineage between Lina Khan and the new guy
Yeah.
Ferguson, right?
Well,
Can you kind of
right.
like,
Yes.
and it comes to before him with the VP
JD.
Yeah, JD.
Big JD.
Mhm.
VP JD Vance.
Mhm.
Who during the Biden administration had really nice things to say about Lina Khan. Really public, on record, in public, complimentary of her. And, from what we understand, he was very involved in promoting then commissioner and now chairman to the chairmanship Ferguson at the FTC. That was a Vance pick from the reporting. So you can kind of see that piece of the Republican Party. And since leaving, Lina Khan has been pictured like palling around with Steve Bannon, as one does, I guess. So it is sort of proof positive of the shoe horse or horseshoe.
Yeah.
We all know it's the same thing. Theory that this, like, populist right and populist left is in lockstep and accord on some things. So, I think that there's sort of, and I don't do politics, so I shouldn't say this, but there is a little bit of a battle for the soul of the Republican Party.
You can say
And
that.
and I think that there's different strains of it. I think yours and mine is certainly can we say the least popular? Yeah. I think the free market people are, like, the most universally despised and ignored. Do you feel like that? I feel like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the neocons and the national conservatives are out there kind of battling for the control of the party right now. You and I are just going to hang back.
I'd say the neocons are winning,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
on along some lines, along the bombing
Yeah.
lines, they're winning a little.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the JD Vance, Mark Rubio struggle is real.
Yes.
I have no dog in that fight, but I'm enjoying the meme game
Mm-hmm.
that goes along with it. And I just think that what we see at the FTC is definitely, like, that populist wing. And the crazy thing about the FTC right now is usually there's supposed to be 5 commissioners, 3 from the president's party and 2 minority party commissioners. But because President Trump has taken a firm hold of agencies and fired people, he hasn't really replaced them. So there's just 2 sitting commissioners at the FTC right now. There's the chair, Ferguson, and then there's one other person who is, like, if you, like, ask Siri, like, show me a populist person, it would show you this commissioner. So I think right now the FTC is
It's 2 people.
missing. It's 2 people right now. They don't even have a third Republican.
What happened to Melissa?
Melissa went
what
on.
was her
she's
name?
Holyoke.
Holyoke.
Melissa Holyoke, yes, Commissioner Holyoke. She I can't remember what exactly the position is, but it's something very impressive. And I'm not being sarcastic. It's like a very high level lawyery thing that she's doing in Utah. I think she was already Solicitor General, so it's something maybe at the federal. It's a very prestigious position that she's involved in now. So they haven't even replaced the empty Republican seat, let alone the 2 Democrat seats at the FTC. So it's just, in many ways, this is a strange time over at the old FTC.
That's interesting.
A little empty.
What's kind of interesting about trying to understand what drives the chair, Ferguson, who, when you listen to him, sometimes he says like things that certainly like upset like people who believe in liberalism in the sense of,
Little L.
little L, like classical liberals, but actually I think the Democrats right now who are rediscovering these values are actually quite shocked, right? I mean, he'll say stuff about using the government against speech, of people they don't like. So he's really he's very much in the vein of the populist, even not kind of I kind of believe that MAGA is like more a vibe, right? It's kind of like people say sometimes
a lot of people are in it for the fun.
Yeah, and like the cruelty is
good
kind
times.
of cruelty. Like people say cruelty is the goal. And I think there's something really to this.
There's some element of vengeance.
Yeah, there's some to this. And yet, I mean, so Melissa Holyoke. Holyoke. And Ferguson are like the ones who during they did great work kind of narrowing the scope of the rule before it was implemented. So it's kind of like it shows that he wasn't going full on Khan, right? He wasn't embracing the full Lina Khan approach.
Yeah. Both those commissioners deserve credit for making that final rule change much more limited than it would have been under just the writing from Lina Khan's office. They did pare it down, but then again, why wouldn't you just delay it, redo it? Why are you fighting for its implementation in court? I think what changed was it's, when you're in the minority, it's like, it's fun to just fight the majority, but when you're the one running the show, it's maybe a different calculation. And also, I don't think any chairman of the FTC has ever had that much sort of hands-on direct influence from the White House. I mean, that really changed things that Donald Trump was saying, forget this hands-off independent agencies business. I can fire you anytime I want. It doesn't have to be for cause, which was a big shift at these agencies. So all the people running these agencies are in a very different situation than I think any previous heads of them have been in, where you feel like you have a little breathing room. You have the mandate from your boss, but I think he's much more involved. Or maybe in this case, JD Vance is much more involved. I think he's shown an interest in this agency. So that's a little different of a political calculation for people. I mean, these guys are all human beings, right? And they are thinking about their next job and where they go from here and all that. And I think that it's been a much harsher spotlight put on them by the White House than maybe other. I've never been the chairman of the FTC, so I don't know that, but that's my sense. And I'm pretty sure I won't be.
Yeah,
I'm going to make that
I've kind of
bold assertion.
I would actually
publicly.
put money on that claim. Yeah, that you won't be, or I won't ever. I will never be like the director of the OMB or director of the budget.
Right, good. We've said it.
Or like
now everybody knows.
Or the head of the Export-Import Bank, for instance. I think that's not in my future. But then I'm kind of. There's another thing involving the FTC right now. So the Supreme Court, and you alluded to it, right? Appears kind of ready to allow the president to fire FTC commissioners at will. So he's fired. Unfortunately, I can't remember her name. So he fired one of the commissioner, and now it's before the Supreme Court, and it's kind of putting us at this moment in time. Us meaning classical liberals and a libertarian, and a kind of an interesting position, right? Because we've had very very many negative thoughts about the administrative states. I'd say, right? I mean,
Yes.
kind of like it's not
It's
like,
kind of our jam at
yeah,
CEI.
we just kind of love to hate it for good
Mhm.
reason. I mean, and like it's not part of the original constitutional design, right? In part it's because the founders didn't even anticipate that Congress would,
Anyone would want to be this meddling in any of it. Yeah.
well, actually kind of or even that Congress would give away, would actually delegate
Yeah.
so much of its
We really
power.
misread that one.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of, but I mean, it is really totally crazy, right? Like how much, and so because there's no part, um, there was no part in the Constitution for the administrative states. We just really don't know what to say about kind of how the administrative state powers would be checked and balanced and shared between the executive branch, right? We don't have much to say about this. And I've always heard from a distance, this is not something I've followed very much, that the Humphreys executor quite of was something like the thing that basically protected or gave the administrative states and these independent agency this kind of sense of security that they couldn't be fired except for cause and I don't know, like what, indecency or something. I don't know, I can't remember. It's cause and something else, right? Grave.
Stick around in this climate, we'll find out.
But anyway, so now the Supreme Court appears ready to kind of maybe allow the president to fire the head of independent agencies. And I have kind of a feeling that there are a lot of people who are kind of not totally cool with that. People who thought in theory they would have actually loved that, right? I mean, am I reading this wrong or?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think if you're a real stickler for the Constitution, which, I'd like to think I am, this idea of independent agencies that kind of were created whole cloth from Congress. And I think the assumption constitutionally was that all three branches would be really greedy to protect their power. And we see some of that, but not as much of it from Congress as you might have expected.
No, and then the executive branch is like, give it.
Yes. It seems to not be equally yoked in terms of counteraction. So, I think that those are, I mean, I'm speaking very generally here, but conceptually, like, that's a great, it's a very legitimate concern to say, well, where do these agencies derive this power? I mean, and at CI where I am, we spend a lot of time, and I have great colleagues who write not even just about the rules for the rules that these agencies make, but what Wayne Cruz, who I'm lucky enough to work with, calls regulatory dark matter, which is just guidance document, just guidance that these agencies put out that, teams of lawyers are paid to read and explain to company. I mean, they kind of act as regulatory dark matter. Like no one votes on them. There's no public hearings on them. There's no process. They just put out some guidance to be helpful so companies know what not to do and what to do. And all of a sudden it's sort of the de facto law of the land. So I think us classical liberal types, as free market types, are rightly concerned about that sort of thing. It's gone way too far, and everyone can pick out sort of their favorite agency to hate. Maybe you hate the EPA, maybe you hate,
or you hate them all. Why choose?
Or you hate them all.
Why choose?
If you're talking to Veronique, you hate them all. So, but then it does lead to some questions about these agencies' ability to act outside of the political realm. Like FTC is a great example. Like we have an FTC that a bunch of people have been pushed out and not filled. And how's that really going over there? So I think it might be that the Supreme Court does the right thing here and reins some of this in, but it will lead to some period of adjustment where then we say, okay, well, then what, how do we recalibrate for this new idea that these agencies are, especially the ones that are called independent agencies, are much more politically influenced and tightly controlled by the executive than maybe we thought, or we were pretending, or we hoped for. I mean, I leave that for everyone to decide, but it is a different it is a different situation than we found ourselves in for a very long time. So I think these are challenging days to be at these agencies if you're running them. And it's just a different it's a much more political environment than I think it has been.
Yeah. And then, but then there's also the question. I mean, I do think that there is just like, I mean, these independent agencies are just really weird. And I do understand, like, I do understand like those who want to overthrow Humphrey's executor and say, they shouldn't be allowed to kind of function just on their own. But then people are saying, well, but if you overthrow it, effectively what you're doing is you're putting this agency directly under the control of the president, basically. And that,
I think the one that scares everyone is when you get to the Fed.
well, but I think,
like when I hear people
I
talk,
think there are reason
they're
to
like,
be
"Whoa."
scared. There's also reason to be scared, if it's independent, completely independent and unaccountable to anyone. But then if it's just basically just like and under the power
beefing up of the executive,
of the president, where especially like now that we seems to be kind of set in a rhythm of like one-term presidents, where it's going to be like, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not making a prediction, but it does seem that kind of like very large majorities for one side or the other, or a president who decides he represents the entire country, seems to not be in the cards for the moment. And as a result, there's something kind of scary about like each time you change
The big
president,
swing.
it's kind of like it's going to be one with the president deciding. And also it's kind of, I don't think it's in our constitutional design. The whole design was meant to actually balance these different branches. And so I'm kind of, I think that what I think is going to be weird is that if they overturn Humphrey's executor, but then don't address the delegation problem. And I kind of like,
I think that's
is there
right.
a possibility that we say, okay, let's redo this, right? We've messed up for 50 years or whatever. And then kind of we start back from scratch. Congress, put on your big boy pants.
That's the kicker, is that Congress could do a lot. I don't know that it will.
Yeah.
But, who knows the future? But as things stand now, I think Congress is like in so many problems, Congress is the answer. A more active, robust role for Congress is the answer. I don't know if we'll see that or what will have to happen to produce that. But that certainly, that's the crux of this question, is how much power is constitutional for Congress to delegate away. That's not a problem that we really anticipated. We thought that they'd all be jealous of their branch and protective of it, and they'd be counterbalancing each other, where that doesn't seem to be the dynamic. So Congress has got to get a little greedy with its role and step up, because to have the executive agency suck up all the power in the system and then just kind of keep counting on the courts to always be the one to intervene, doesn't strike me as a particularly healthy way for a republic to go on for too long.
No, I mean, I agree. It seems to me that what the court has been trying to do is to actually kind of try to change things at the margin to give Congress incentives to do their job. But so far, they don't seem interested.
No takers.
They're like, no thanks, we're good.
We're good.
We're good. But
we're gonna hold out.
Yes, but so okay, let's go back to your title. You're the director of the Center for Technology and Innovation. So apart from writing about the shoe horse theory, the horseshoe theory applied to the FTC, and how Ferguson is actually not different enough to Khan. From our perspective, I think it's okay to say that.
From our perspective,
it's just kind of we would want to see like big difference. What are the other issues you're working on the technology front or the innovation front that you're excited about?
It's a buffet of glamorous.
Yeah, I know.
Issue. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know how it is in DC. Yeah. So I do the kind of more straight tech issues. So like the social media content regulation, the kids' online safety stuff, and then a lot of the antitrust stuff, which kind of happened because I have a little background there. And when it really started amping back up, it was the tech company, the big cases against the tech companies. And then all of a sudden, you start there and then you find yourself being asked about airline mergers. I don't know. We learn, we grow. That's
Yeah.
how it goes in this town. And then I also do the telecom stuff. So I'm gonna spare.
And the some AI stuff, right? I assume.
Yeah. Oh, well, now, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's mostly people just asking me to explain what it is, and I'm like, no, I refuse. No one knows.
Yeah. No one knows yet.
It's whatever the latest breaking thing is. That's what AI
Yeah.
is, and they just look at you, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I won't do it, but I will defend it.
So it's kind of interesting. There's a big, definitely a big anti-tech movement under Biden.
The tech lash.
Very
Yes.
anti-AI. I think I've heard Mark Andreessen talk to Barry Weiss, where he was basically explaining why he supported Trump. And he said, basically he had several meetings with the Biden administration on AI, and he got really, really freaked out that these guys wanted to just basically kill it or actually
Shut it
control
down.
or control it at the very least, kind of control it.
Yes, harness it.
Do a European type, kind of precautionary
Exactly.
principle on steroids, it seems to me, right? But so all the tech guys kind of saw something in Trump that said, this is not going to be like this. You're going to be able to do what you want to do. And there's some of that obviously going on, and so they all went in. They were all at the inauguration and all this, and it's worked out pretty well. But then you have that whole populist thing that works against this.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of the two waves of tech. So this will both illustrate our horseshoe shoe horse and the opposite. Meaning, I think that the tech lash under Biden had a lot of Republican populist support as well. It was very popular to blame every problem, every difficulty, every bad thing on social media and the associated tech companies. And that's still there. Like when you talk about kind of over-regulating under the guise of child safety and stuff like that in that wave of technology. But I have to say, the Trump administration has been a big break from the Biden, who, as you discussed, they really wanted to kind of precautionary principle it, a la the EU and other parts of the world, who just said, well, we can't do anything until we know nothing bad will ever happen with it, which is, not a great way to proceed as a civilization, because we wouldn't have fire.
Yeah.
So to just the first one, fill in all the things we wouldn't have after that. But that was kind of the mindset with Biden, which is very much not the mindset
It really
under
isn't.
the Trump administration. They're very pro AI, and they've made huge strides in opening that up, and they're trying now to get this
Framework.
the framework and then put it into effect so that it's a moratorium on the state regulations.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a kind of a 50-state patchwork, and when you're racing China to be the AI leader, 50 different compliance regimes is not a great recipe for that. So I think they're spending a lot of time explaining to Republican politicians that you can be for state rights and still be for the Commerce Clause. So they've really distinguished themselves from the Biden approach to AI. So I give them full credit for being pro innovation. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. I don't know what happens after whatever happens to Congress this fall.
That framework,
they're trying.
I will say this is the one, these are some of the areas where the Trump administration seems to be actually led somewhat by adults. And they're putting a framework around. So it's not like free for all. They're actually trying to set the rules of the game. It has a little bit with everything in the Trump administration. It's a little bit crony. It feels a little like this. I can't really quite put my finger on it because I don't really understand it. But it
kind
does
of looking, where's the angle?
Yes, but it does seem that they really are trying. I like to really put guardrails that are allowing permissionless innovation, that are allowing the technology to prosper while kind of still thinking about security. It seems they're doing the same on crypto. They're doing, and certainly they're doing a lot on the energy abundance, which basically, powers that whole thing.
Yeah. I think that's that feeds nicely into it, right? Because this administration has been so much better on sort of energy diet than the Biden administration has been. So I think that's kind of a nice compliment to being pretty pro AI innovation as well for them.
At the same time, right, they are kind of just like making it really hard to build data centers because of the tariffs and because of all of that stuff, right? I mean, it's a kind of
Yeah,
like,
you're back to your favorite populist there,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I
That's
mean,
the
ulti-
Josh Hawley
yeah,
and Bernie Sanders
and the
holding
president
hands,
too.
walking
Yeah,
through. And
and the president
so
has like great sympathy, it seems, with some of the most extreme progressives in a way, right? But it.
well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know where people think their phones are being powered from, but I have to tell you, you're going to need data centers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, but it is kind of interesting that kind of the energy now of the anti-AI is like kind of moving towards and against the data center. Like, I don't know if you saw, so it was like kind of data centers are raising your electricity and to some extent it's true, but in part it's because of energy supply constraints as opposed to
also
it's
we have public utilities
yes,
as
that
like there's a lot of
yeah,
problems
there's a
we could
lot of
address. Yeah.
problems, right? And there's that, but there also, I don't know if you saw like the whole. It was a controversy for like 5 minutes about the water consumption,
Water.
and then it turned out as kind of everyone was getting all worked up about the consumption of water because someone wrote a book that had made a million percentage mistake in that book about the
Whoops. That's
consumption.
why I don't write books.
You know, I mean, have you read that? Have you seen
It
that?
comes back to
Have
get
you
you.
have you
Yeah.
seen that thing? I thought it was actually quite funny. And she was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for your feedback. We've corrected the
Everybody
mistake.
makes mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Everybody makes
But it was kind of
mistakes.
like so. But I mean, it is kind of astonishing. Like the Virginia just released a poll about like I think 30 something percent of Virginians. I think it's Virginians would support a data center near them, which is down from like 60 something percent, right? I mean, it is kind of this is going to be a big
It's
deal.
a big fight. I mean, there's a lot of muscle memory from different groups of constituents about being, the not in my backyard people
Yeah.
that it's not new to data centers, right? And general worries about energy production or water, those are things that
No.
that infrastructure policy pushers for and against are kind of already in existence. So to see them kind of pop into the AI debate, I guess, is what we should expect. But again, I think it's good to have those conversations. People have different perspectives. That's great. But at some point, you have to be like, do we want the world's AI to be US AI or Chinese
Because
Communist
we know
Party
that it's
AI?
not going to be European.
I mean, you're originally European, so you can say stuff like that. But if I make that joke, I will
I mean,
get
look,
banned
the internet,
from visiting the
you know,
continent.
the
And
French
I go there to
produced
eat.
the French produced the Minitel, and they were very proud of that, and that's where it ended.
I say it all the time. Like, Europe's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to be regulated there or taxed. I should have changed the joke to be with you today. I wouldn't want to be taxed there. So it has its merits. I don't think it's like leading the way on AI,
Nope.
but that hasn't stopped. Like, there's U.S. efforts to emulate how they've regulated their tech sector. I mean, they're kicking around. So I don't know what to tell people. I should just carry around a globe and point at Europe and be like, here it is. Like, they've run the experiment for us. What do you want me to tell you that you don't like? You can't. Google Maps doesn't work in Europe. Is that the kind of world you want to live in?
No.
No.
I mean,
We want to know where to get like a cheeseburger when we're traveling for work. So let's get real.
I just love that you have your priorities right. It's
Well,
just not often.
I'm a woman of the people.
Yes.
That's what everyone says about me.
Exactly. So now I want to finish. Like, what is your take on consumer welfare? Is it kind of like standard? Is it kind of over, or do you think in the battle for the soul of what's standard?
I think we're hanging in there. Listen, the courts never really gave way too much. It was so well established by precedent and the better economics that goes along with it and a lot of things that it really did hold up pretty well even during the Biden administration challenges in court. There weren't a lot of wins for Lina Khan. It kind of got bounced back. So that's good. But I think, like all good ideas, it needs to constantly be defended because it's constantly going to be, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like in
Yeah,
policy,
yeah.
like the battle is never over, right? You
Mm-mm.
win this battle and you go on to the next. But I think the economics on it is just so much better. And you really have to be someone who just denies that economics matters to oppose it the way a lot of these people do. And it's really sort of about like vibes and feelings and being nice and these sort of lofty, vague goals. And I think, that just doesn't get it done when you get into court. So
We may have a problem though down the road because like Lina Khan was like, what, 30 or 32 or 35 or something.
she's going to be with
Right.
us for a while.
So she's kind of started that center, right, in Columbia, at Columbia.
Yeah.
I think
she's going to be pumping out the believers.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Is then like the next Democratic or kind of MAGA presidents are going to be appointing judges that believe in that doctrine, that new standard of like kind of, big is bad and all this. But you know what? We won't care. We'll be dead.
We'll be retired then.
Yeah, I know. Like
We'll be sitting somewhere enjoying nice glass of bubbly
yeah,
and
yeah,
not taking phone calls.
yeah. And our
from
children will have to fight for their freedom. So,
We gave them a great head
Well,
start. They can handle
we
it.
certainly have. And I think this is a great place
Right?
to stop. So,
We probably should have stopped a while ago now that we've gotten so silly. But I'd warn people at the beginning, if you put two friends on, this is what you're going to get.
exactly. Well, it was awesome. So thanks so much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.